The sun cast long shadows across the parade grounds of Fort Hood as Sergeant Major Williams called the formation to attention. 600 soldiers snapped to parade rest in perfect unison, their boots striking the asphalt with thunderous precision. In the front row stood the younger officers, spines straight as ramrods, faces betraying nothing. Behind them, the enlisted ranks stretched back in perfect lines, a testament to discipline forged through generations of American military tradition. At the reviewing stand, Colonel Michael "Iron Mike" Harrington adjusted his dress uniform one final time. 35 years of service had taught him that some ceremonies mattered more than others. This one mattered. "Ladies and gentlemen," the base commander's voice boomed through the speakers, "today we honor a living legend, a man whose actions during Operation Desert Storm changed the face of modern tank warfare forever." Harrington's weathered face remained impassive, but his mind drifted back to the sands of Iraq. February 26, 1991. The date was branded into his memory like a cattle iron, the night they'd made history. As commander of Eagle 66 during the Battle of 73 Easting, then Captain Harrington led his M1A1 Abrams against overwhelming odds. In 23 minutes of combat, his tank destroyed 6 T-72s without taking a single hit. The memories came flooding back uninvited. Not the sanitized version from the history books or the Discovery Channel specials. The real memories. The smell of diesel and cordite. The radio chatter growing increasingly frantic as the Republican Guard realized they were being slaughtered. The infrared image of Iraqi tankers abandoning their vehicles, running for their lives into the desert night. The strange silence in the moments after the shooting stopped. General Alexander Wilson stepped forward to the microphone. A career Pentagon man with perfectly parted silver hair, his uniform adorned with ribbons that told a story of Washington postings rather than combat deployments. "Colonel Harrington represents the finest traditions of our armored forces," Wilson continued. "In an age of drones, satellites, and precision weapons, he reminds us that at the heart of American military might still beats the courage of the individual warrior." Harrington suppressed a smile. He'd heard variations of this speech throughout his career. The old warrior in a changing world. The dinosaur who refused extinction. He'd embraced the role because it contained enough truth to be authentic. Technology changed, but combat remained fundamentally human. He believed that with bone-deep conviction. The general motioned him forward. "Colonel Michael Harrington, it is my honor to present you with the Legion of Merit for your decades of service to our nation." Harrington marched forward with the precision that had become second nature. As Wilson pinned the medal to his chest, flashbulbs popped across the parade ground. Another piece of metal to join the rows already there. Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart. The tangible record of a life spent in service. "Thank you, sir," Harrington said simply. Wilson leaned in, speaking low enough that only Harrington could hear. "The secretary wants to see you tomorrow morning." "Oh, 800 Pentagon." Harrington maintained his neutral expression, but his mind raced. The Secretary of Defense didn't summon retiring colonels without good reason. "I'll be there, sir." The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur of handshakes and congratulations. Junior officers seeking a final word of wisdom. Old comrades sharing knowing nods. The ritual farewell of a warrior culture as old as civilization itself. Only after the last well-wisher had departed did Harrington allow his shoulders to relax. He walked slowly across the now empty parade ground toward the tank park where 5 M1A2 Abrams sat in perfect alignment, their 120mm guns raised at identical angles. He ran his hand along the composite armor of the nearest tank, feeling the sun-warmed metal beneath his fingertips. "Saying goodbye to your girlfriends, Dad?" Harrington turned to see his son approaching. Captain Thomas Harrington had his father's build and his mother's eyes. Currently assigned to the 3rd Armored Division, he commanded his own tank platoon with the same intensity his father had shown a generation earlier. "Just remembering," the elder Harrington replied. "These aren't the same beasts we took into Iraq." Thomas nodded. "Better in every way. Targeting systems that can hit a license plate at 3 miles. Armor that shrugs off most anything the enemy can throw at it. And yet what? And yet they still need men inside them. Men who understand that combat isn't a video game. Men who know that technology fails at the worst possible moment." Thomas had heard this particular sermon many times, but he never interrupted. It wasn't just respect for his father. There was undeniable truth in the old man's words. "Join me for dinner?" Thomas asked. Sarah's making pot roast. The kids are asking for their grandpa. Harrington smiled. His grandchildren represented everything he'd fought to protect. Wouldn't miss it. I've got some paperwork to finish, then I'll head over. Thomas checked his watch. 1900? I'll be there. As Thomas walked away, Harrington turned back to the tanks. These machines had defined his existence for nearly 4 decades. Tomorrow he would begin the process of separating from the army. 30 days of out-processing, then civilian life. The thought left him cold. In his office, Harrington found a stack of messages waiting. Most were congratulatory notes from officers he'd served with over the years. One stood out, a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words. They need you one last time. No signature, no explanation, just those 5 words in standard military typeset. Harrington turned the paper over, finding nothing on the reverse. He considered the possibilities. A prank from an old battle buddy? Some cryptic message from the Pentagon related to tomorrow's meeting? A warning? He slipped the note into his pocket just as his phone rang. Harrington. Colonel, this is Dr. Victoria Hayes, Department of Defense Advanced Research Projects Division. I'm calling about tomorrow's meeting. Harrington's interest sharpened. DARPA didn't get involved unless cutting-edge technology was at stake. What can I do for you, Doctor? The secretary asked me to ensure you understand the classified nature of tomorrow's briefing. You'll need your TS/SCI clearance documentation. Top secret/sensitive compartmented information. The highest level of security clearance. Understood. Can you give me any indication what this concerns? A pause. I'm afraid not, Colonel. Not on an unsecured line. But I can tell you that your experience during the 73 Easting engagement is particularly relevant. The conversation ended with logistics for his Pentagon arrival, leaving Harrington with more questions than answers. He completed his remaining paperwork mechanically, his mind preoccupied with possibilities. Dinner at his son's home provided temporary distraction. His grandchildren, Emma and Michael, aged 7 and 5, bombarded him with stories of school and soccer practice. Sarah, his daughter-in-law, had indeed prepared pot roast, his favorite. The normalcy of family life felt almost surreal against the backdrop of cryptic messages and mysterious Pentagon summons. Only after the children were in bed did Thomas broach the subject. Word around base is you're headed to D.C. tomorrow, he said, pouring his father another finger of bourbon. News travels fast. Thomas leaned forward. There's more. The Pentagon has gone into overdrive about something. Secure communications, classified courier deliveries. Something big is happening. Harrington raised an eyebrow. And how would a captain know about Pentagon communications? Because they were reaching out to tank commanders, specifically those with combat experience. My battalion commander pulled me aside today, asked about my deployment record in detail. Harrington swirled the amber liquid in his glass. They're assessing combat readiness. That's what it feels like, Thomas agreed. But why now? There's no flashpoint that would justify it. North Korea is quiet, Middle East is relatively stable, Russia's focused on its internal problems. Sometimes the greatest threats are the ones nobody sees coming, Harrington said quietly. When he left his son's home shortly before midnight, the night air had turned cold. Stars glittered overhead with crystalline clarity, reminding him of that night in the Iraqi desert when the vast emptiness had been broken only by the burning hulks of enemy tanks. Sleep came fitfully. His dreams were filled with the grinding of tank treads and the hollow boom of the 120mm main gun firing. He woke before dawn, his body following the rhythms established through decades of military discipline. The flight to D.C. aboard a military transport was uneventful. A car waited for him at Andrews Air Force Base, whisking him through morning traffic to the Pentagon. The massive building hummed with its usual efficiency, but Harrington detected an undercurrent of tension in the faces of the officers he passed. Security procedures took longer than usual. His credentials were checked and rechecked. A retinal scan confirmed his identity before he was escorted to a secure conference room, deep within the building's inner ring. Inside, 8 people waited around a polished oak table. Secretary of Defense Lawrence Chambers sat at the head, his customary bow tie perfectly centered. General Wilson stood behind him. The others were unfamiliar to Harrington, though their bearings suggested a mix of military and intelligence backgrounds. Colonel Harrington, the secretary said, rising to shake his hand, thank you for coming on such short notice. My pleasure, Mr. Secretary. Please have a seat. What we're about to discuss doesn't leave this room. Harrington took the offered chair. The room's atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. The secretary nodded to a woman in civilian clothes. Dr. Hayes will brief you on the situation. Victoria Hayes appeared to be in her late 40s with intelligent eyes behind frameless glasses. She touched a control, and the room's lights dimmed as a projection screen descended from the ceiling. Colonel Harrington, what I'm about to share has been classified at the highest level. She clicked a remote, and satellite imagery appeared on the screen. These images were taken 72 hours ago at a military testing facility in a hostile nation. Harrington studied the photographs. They showed what appeared to be a vehicle testing ground, with several objects moving in formation across open terrain. What are we looking at? He asked. Hayes clicked again, and the image zoomed in. This is what our analysts have designated Typhoon. It's a next-generation wheeled combat vehicle with capabilities that potentially outmatch our current Abrams platform. The image showed an 8-wheeled vehicle with a low profile and what appeared to be a 105mm main gun. Its lines were sleek, predatory. Wheeled, not tracked, Harrington observed, sacrificing armor protection for speed and operational range. Hayes nodded. Precisely. Initial intelligence suggests top speeds of over 65 miles per hour on improved roads. Operational range exceeding 500 miles without refueling. Most concerning is its fire control system, which appears to allow accurate firing while moving at speed. A hit-and-run platform, Harrington said, designed to strike quickly and withdraw before counterattack. Yes, and our intelligence suggests they're preparing for mass production. Within 18 months, they could field enough units to create a significant tactical advantage in any conventional conflict. The secretary leaned forward. Colonel, we need a response, something that can counter this threat without requiring a decade of R&D and billions in appropriations. That's where you come in. With respect, Mayor Secretary, I'm retiring in 30 days, and I'm a tanker, not a weapons developer. You're more than a tanker, Colonel, Hayes interjected. You're the officer who perfected modern armored warfare tactics at 73 Easting. You demonstrated that superior training and tactical acumen can overcome technological advantages. We need that perspective now. General Wilson cleared his throat. We've initiated a crash program, codenamed Centaur Initiative. Its purpose is to develop the American counterpart to Typhoon, but we're facing significant challenges. Hayes changed the display to show another vehicle. This one was clearly American in design, also with a wheeled chassis, but bulkier, less refined. This is our current prototype, she explained. It's experiencing significant problems with stability, targeting accuracy, and crew survivability. The design team is fragmented between competing visions of what this platform should be. Harrington studied the image with a professional eye. Even from the photograph, he could see fundamental flaws in the vehicle's profile and armor distribution. You want me to consult on the project, he said. It wasn't a question. The secretary nodded. More than consult, we want you to take command of the entire initiative. Full autonomy, reporting directly to me. Your combat experience, combined with your engineering background, makes you uniquely qualified. Harrington sat back. The offer was unexpected. After a career spent in field commands, the prospect of heading a research and development project held little appeal. Yet the seriousness in the room was palpable. Why the urgency? Wheeled combat vehicles aren't new. The Russians have had them for decades. Hayes exchanged glances with the secretary before answering. Typhoon represents more than just a new vehicle. It embodies a new doctrine of warfare. High-speed precision strikes against command and control nodes. The ability to disperse rapidly to avoid counterattack. Integration with unmanned aerial systems for targeting. It's a system designed specifically to negate our advantages in conventional armor. And if deployed in sufficient numbers, General Wilson added, it could fundamentally alter the balance of power in several key regions. The secretary leaned forward. Colonel, I understand this isn't what you envisioned for your final days of service, but your country needs your expertise one last time. Harrington thought of the note he'd received. They need you one last time. Too coincidental to ignore. Who else knows about this request, he asked. Only those in this room, the secretary replied. Harrington made a mental note to investigate the source of that note later. For now, he had a more immediate decision. Where is this project based? Aberdeen Proving Ground, Hayes answered. We've established a secure facility there, isolated from regular operations. Harrington nodded slowly. I'd need to select my own core team, people I trust. Of course, the secretary agreed quickly. Whatever resources you require. And complete authority over the project direction. No interference from contractors or political considerations. The secretary hesitated briefly before nodding. Granted. Then I accept, Harrington said, knowing he was postponing his civilian life indefinitely. When do I start? Immediately, the secretary replied. Dr. Hayes will brief you on the details en route to Aberdeen. The meeting concluded with handshakes and expressions of gratitude. As the room cleared, General Wilson lingered behind. Mike, he said, using Harrington's first name for the first time, I know this isn't what you planned, but it's important, maybe the most important thing you'll ever do. Harrington studied the man's face, searching for hidden agendas. Why me, Alex? There are younger officers with engineering backgrounds. Hell, there are generals with more political clout to push a project like this. Wilson's expression turned grave. Because this isn't just about building a better vehicle, it's about understanding how to fight with it. And nobody understands armored warfare better than you. The general hesitated, then added, there's something else, something not included in the briefing. I'm listening. Intelligence suggests the Typhoon project is being led by someone who knows our tactics and vulnerabilities intimately, someone who studied 73 Easting in detail. An American? Wilson nodded grimly. We believe so, which means they've designed this vehicle specifically to counter our strengths and exploit our weaknesses. We need someone who can think like them, who can see what they see. Harrington absorbed this new information thoughtfully. I'll bear that in mind. As Wilson left, Harrington remained seated, contemplating the path ahead. His retirement plans were indefinitely postponed. Instead of fishing trips and woodworking projects, he faced what might be the most challenging assignment of his career. The irony wasn't lost on him. After a lifetime commanding tanks, his final mission would be to create a vehicle designed to render tanks obsolete. The journey to Aberdeen with Dr. Hayes provided more details about the Centaur initiative. The project had been running for 7 months with little progress. The team consisted of brilliant engineers and designers who couldn't agree on fundamental aspects of the vehicle's purpose and design. Some want a tank killer, Hayes explained as their cars sped through the Maryland countryside. Others envision a reconnaissance platform with enhanced survivability. Still others are pushing for a command and control vehicle with minimal direct combat capability. The result has been a compromised design that excels at nothing. Classic design by committee failure, Harrington observed. Exactly. What we need is a clear vision and the authority to implement it. That's where you come in. Harrington gazed out the window at the passing landscape. Tell me about the team I'll be working with. Hayes handed him a tablet. These are the key personnel files. The lead engineer is Dr. Marcus Reynolds, MIT-educated, former General Dynamics designer. Brilliant but stubborn. Harrington scrolled through Reynolds' file. Says here he's never served in the military. That's correct. Most of the technical team are civilians. That could be a problem. They'll design what they think soldiers need, not what soldiers actually need. Hayes smiled slightly. Hence your appointment, Colonel. The tablet showed other key team members. Lieutenant Sarah Weiss, a UAV specialist. Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, a weapons expert, and a dozen other engineers and military personnel. You mentioned earlier that Typhoon integrates with unmanned systems, Harrington said. How advanced is that capability? Very. They're using AI-driven drones for target acquisition and battle damage assessment. The vehicle itself has reduced crew requirements, 3 instead of 4, with automation handling many traditional crew functions. Harrington frowned. Reducing crew size is a mistake. When systems fail, and they always do, you need human redundancy. That's exactly the kind of insight we need, Hayes said. The civilian engineers see crew reduction as progress. They don't understand the realities of combat. As they approached Aberdeen Proving Ground, Harrington's thoughts turned to the mysterious note again. The timing suggested whoever sent it knew about this assignment before he did. A warning? An encouragement? Impossible to tell without knowing the sender. The Centaur facility was located in a remote corner of the vast proving ground, surrounded by additional security. Their vehicle passed through 3 checkpoints before reaching a cluster of nondescript buildings. No external signage indicated the nature of the work inside. Home sweet home, Hayes said as they parked. For the foreseeable future, anyway. Harrington grabbed his duffel bag from the trunk. How soon can I see the prototype? It's being prepped for your inspection now. The team has been told to expect new leadership, but they don't know who yet. The main building's interior was a stark contrast to its bland exterior. State-of-the-art laboratories, computer modeling stations, and engineering workshops filled the space. Staff moved purposefully between workstations, the atmosphere charged with the focused energy of a high-priority project. Hayes led him to a conference room where 5 people waited around a table littered with technical drawings and tablet computers. They stood as Harrington entered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hayes announced, "allow me to introduce Colonel Michael Harrington. By direct appointment from the Secretary of Defense, Colonel Harrington is assuming command of the Centaur initiative, effective immediately." Harrington surveyed the room, reading the reactions. Surprise on most faces, skepticism on others, particularly from the man he recognized from the personnel file as Dr. Reynolds. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes," Harrington said, setting down his bag. "I know this comes as a surprise to all of you. Let me be clear about why I'm here. The Centaur project is now a national security priority. The Secretary believes my combat experience will provide valuable perspective to your technical expertise." Reynolds, a trim man in his mid-40s with prematurely gray hair, spoke first. "With respect, Colonel, this is primarily an engineering challenge. We're pushing the boundaries of materials science and digital systems integration, and creating a weapons platform that men and women will stake their lives on," Harrington countered. "A platform that must function in the chaos of combat, not just in laboratory conditions." A younger woman in an Army uniform, Lieutenant Weiss according to her name tag, nodded slightly. "The Colonel has a point. Our simulations don't account for many real-world combat variables." Reynolds looked displeased but didn't argue further. Instead, he gestured to the technical drawings on the table. "These are our current design specifications. We're working with a titanium composite hull structure, modular armor systems, and a hybrid electric drivetrain." Harrington glanced at the plans but didn't sit. "I appreciate the overview, but I want to see the actual vehicle first. Talk is cheap. Metal tells the truth." Reynolds exchanged glances with his colleagues before nodding reluctantly. "It's in the testing bay, this way." The group walked through a secure door into a vast hangar space. In the center sat the Centaur prototype, its angular form bristling with sensors and communication equipment. At first glance, it resembled an oversized Stryker combat vehicle, but with significant modifications. The turret housed what appeared to be a 105mm gun, and the hull was lower, more predatory in profile. Harrington walked slowly around the vehicle, examining it from every angle. He ran his hand along the armor plating, checked the track tension, and studied the driver's vision blocks. The others watched silently as he completed his inspection. Finally, he turned to Reynolds. "Let's take it for a drive." The engineer looked startled. "It's not scheduled for mobility testing today. We're running diagnostics on the fire control system." "Consider the schedule changed," Harrington said firmly. "I need to feel how it moves." Reynolds began to object, but Hayes intervened. "Make it happen, Doctor. The Colonel's authority in this matter is absolute." 30 minutes later, Harrington sat in the commander's position as the Centaur rumbled across Aberdeen's testing grounds. Reynolds occupied the gunner's seat while a civilian technician handled the driving. The vehicle moved with surprising smoothness for its size, but Harrington immediately noticed problems with the commander's sightlines and the awkward positioning of critical controls. "Increase speed," he ordered the driver. "Let's see what she can do." The vehicle accelerated, bouncing harder over the rough terrain. At 40 miles per hour, the ride became increasingly unstable, the hull pitching violently. "Suspension's too rigid," Harrington noted, "and the commander station is unusable at speed. I can't maintain situational awareness with this setup." Reynolds made notes on a tablet. "We've been focused on fire on the move capability. The stabilization systems are still being refined." "Try to acquire that target," Harrington instructed, pointing to a derelict tank hull about 1,000 meters away. Reynolds swiveled the gun tube and attempted to lock the targeting system. The gun bounced erratically, unable to maintain a steady aim on the target. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Harrington said. "You've created a platform that can't perform its primary function under realistic conditions." The test drive continued for another hour, with Harrington methodically documenting the vehicle's shortcomings. By the time they returned to the hangar, his notebook was filled with observations and suggestions. The team reassembled in the conference room, the atmosphere noticeably tenser than before. "Let me be blunt," Harrington began. "The current design fails to meet basic combat requirements. It's unstable at operational speeds. The crew positions are poorly configured. The fire control system doesn't function in realistic movement scenarios. And the armor distribution leaves critical vulnerabilities exposed." Reynolds' face had grown increasingly flushed during Harrington's assessment. "Colonel, with all due respect," You've been here for less than a day. We've been working on this project for months. Many of the issues you've identified are already on our development roadmap. Then your roadmap is too slow, Harrington replied evenly. According to intelligence, our adversary will begin production of their equivalent vehicle within 18 months. We don't have time for incremental improvements. He stood and walked to a whiteboard, picking up a marker. As of today, we're implementing a new development approach. We're going to focus on three core principles: mobility, firepower, and survivability, in that order. Harrington began sketching a modified vehicle design on the board. The Typhoon is designed for hit-and-run tactics. We need to counter with a platform that can do the same but better. That means sacrificing some armor protection for speed and operational range. That contradicts basic American armored doctrine, Weiss observed. Exactly, Harrington said, which is why they won't expect it. We've always prioritized crew protection, sometimes at the expense of mobility. But this is a different kind of fight. We need to be faster, more agile. For the next hour, Harrington outlined his vision for the Centaur: a lighter, faster vehicle with enhanced situational awareness systems, reduced electronic signature to avoid detection, modular armor that could be configured for specific mission requirements, and most controversially, a return to a four-person crew configuration, rejecting the automation-driven reduction that had been central to Reynolds' design. Machines fail, he explained, especially in combat. When that happens, you need humans who can adapt. A three-person crew is already overwhelmed with normal operations. When systems start failing, they're combat ineffective. Reynolds shook his head. Adding a fourth crew member increases weight, reduces internal space, and complicates the digital architecture we've developed. Then redesign the architecture, Harrington said firmly. Humans aren't optional. They're the core of the system. The meeting ended with clear battle lines drawn. Reynolds and several engineers clearly resented Harrington's takeover and fundamental redesign. Weiss and Rodriguez seemed more receptive, recognizing the combat wisdom in his approach. The others remained noncommittal, waiting to see how the power struggle would resolve. Harrington remained in the conference room after the others left, studying the technical specifications more carefully. Hayes joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. That went about as well as expected, she said, sliding 1 cup toward him. Harrington took a sip of the bitter liquid. Reynolds is going to be a problem. He's invested heavily in his vision for the project. You've essentially told him to start over. Not start over, refocus. The fundamental technology is sound. It's the application that's flawed. Hayes sat across from him. The secretary warned me you wouldn't pull punches. If he wanted a diplomat, he should have sent a diplomat. Harrington closed the technical manual he'd been reviewing. This isn't about egos or careers. It's about creating a platform that keeps American soldiers alive while accomplishing the mission. Nothing else matters. I agree, Hayes said. But you'll need Reynolds and his team working with you, not against you. These are some of the brightest minds in defense engineering. Brightness doesn't equal rightness. Not when it comes to combat systems. Harrington sighed, feeling the weight of the day settling onto his shoulders. Where am I staying while I'm here? We've arranged quarters on base. Nothing fancy but comfortable enough. Your belongings are being shipped from Fort Hood. Harrington nodded. Another temporary home in a lifetime of temporary homes. I'll need to speak with my son tonight, privately. Of course, there's a secure line in your office. Hayes hesitated. Is there something I should know? Harrington considered mentioning the cryptic note but decided against it. Until he knew more about its origin, sharing its existence might create unnecessary complications. No, family matters. He stood, gathering his notes. Tomorrow I want to review all intelligence on Typhoon, every scrap we have, and I want to begin crew trials with the modified configuration I outlined. That's an aggressive timeline. We don't have the luxury of caution, Doctor, not anymore. That evening in the Spartan quarters assigned to him, Harrington placed a secure call to his son. After exchanging pleasantries and assuring Thomas that yes, he was fine, and no, he couldn't discuss his current assignment, he carefully broached the subject that had been nagging at him. Tom, did you send me a note yesterday before my retirement ceremony? A pause. No, what kind of note? Nothing important, just checking. Harrington changed the subject, asking about his grandchildren, but his mind remained fixed on the mystery. Someone had known about his assignment before he did. Someone with access to Fort Hood and knowledge of his movements. Someone who wanted him to know that his services were needed one last time. The same phrase the secretary had used in their meeting. After ending the call, Harrington sat on the edge of his bed, turning the puzzle over in his mind. His instincts told him the note was a warning, not a threat. But a warning about what? The assignment itself? Someone involved with the project? Sleep eluded him. He found himself thinking about the Centaur prototype, mentally redesigning key systems to address the flaws he'd identified. By dawn, he had filled a notebook with sketches and technical notes. It felt good to be fully engaged again, his mind focused on a tangible problem. He arrived at the facility before anyone else, using his new security credentials to access the main building. In the quiet of early morning, he walked to the hangar where the Centaur prototype sat silent and imposing. Standing before the machine, Harrington felt a strange sense of destiny. His career had begun with tanks and would end with creating their successor. The circle complete. "We've got work to do, old man," he murmured to himself. One last mission. He didn't notice the security camera swiveling to track his movements, its feed being monitored on a screen thousands of miles away, where another figure watched with keen interest. "So they brought in Harrington," the observer said to an aide standing nearby. "Predictable, but potentially troublesome." "Should we be concerned, sir?" the aide asked. "On the contrary," the man replied, his American accent tinged with something foreign acquired over years abroad. "Having my old friend involved makes this much more interesting. He's good, very good, but he's also predictable." The observer tapped the screen where Harrington's figure stood before the Centaur. "He'll try to outthink us using the same tactics that worked 30 years ago. But the battlefield has changed. Technology has changed. And unlike Mike, I've changed with it." "What are your orders, sir?" "Proceed as planned, but increase surveillance on the Aberdeen facility. I want to know every modification Harrington makes, every test result, every success and failure. And if he succeeds in creating a viable counter to Typhoon," the man smiled coldly. "He won't, because I know exactly how he thinks. I was there at 73 Easting. I saw his tactics firsthand, and I've spent the last 3 decades learning how to defeat them." The screen showed Harrington climbing onto the Centaur, examining its turret mechanism with methodical care. "Besides," the observer added, "we've made sure the Centaur project has been compromised from the start. Harrington might be good, but even he can't overcome sabotage from within." Back at Aberdeen, Harrington descended from the vehicle as the first staff began arriving for the day. He didn't see the flashing light on the security camera, or know that his every move was being studied by the one man who might understand his thinking better than anyone else. The stage was set. 2 old warriors, 2 competing visions of the future of warfare, and between them the fate of American armored supremacy hanging in the balance. Harrington's day began with an intelligence briefing on Typhoon. Hayes presented satellite imagery, technical assessments, and intercepts that painted an increasingly concerning picture of the adversary's capabilities. The vehicle's development was progressing faster than initially believed, with field trials showing impressive results. "Their targeting accuracy while moving at 50 miles per hour is unprecedented," Hayes explained, displaying a video of a Typhoon hitting stationary targets while maneuvering at high speed. "This level of fire-on-the-move capability exceeds even our latest Abrams upgrades." Harrington studied the footage carefully. "Look at the suspension system. The way it absorbs terrain impacts while keeping the gun stable. That's not standard design. Our engineers believe they're using an advanced hydropneumatic system combined with digital stabilization. We need something similar," Harrington decided. "Or better, get me Reynolds." The chief engineer arrived minutes later, his expression guarded. Clearly, he was still smarting from yesterday's critique. "Dr. Reynolds," Harrington began without preamble, "I need your team to redesign the Centaur's suspension and stabilization systems. Current performance is unacceptable." Reynolds crossed his arms. "We're already working on improvements, but the fundamental issue is weight distribution. Your insistence on a 4-person crew adds nearly 400 pounds and disrupts the center of gravity calculations." "Then recalculate," Harrington said simply. "The 4-person crew is non-negotiable." The 2 men locked eyes, neither willing to concede. Finally, Reynolds nodded stiffly. "We'll make it work, but I want it noted that I disagree with this approach." "So noted. How quickly can you implement the changes?" 3 weeks for design modifications, another 2 for implementation and initial testing. You have 1 week. Reynolds' eyebrows shot up. "That's impossible." "No, doctor. Impossible is sending American soldiers into battle with equipment that doesn't work. 1 week. After Reynolds left, Hayes gave Harrington a questioning look. "You're pushing them hard." "Because we don't have time for academic perfectionism. Reynolds needs to understand that this isn't a research project, it's a matter of national security. The remainder of the morning was spent reorganizing the project teams to reflect Harrington's priorities. Some engineers were reassigned, others given new directives. By noon, a clear sense of urgency had permeated the facility. Whether they agreed with his approach or not, everyone understood that business as usual was over. Lunch was interrupted by a call from the Pentagon. General Wilson, speaking on a secure line, informed Harrington that the secretary wanted a progress report in 3 days. "Tell him we're reorienting the project," Harrington replied. "Initial design modifications are underway. We should have preliminary test results by the end of the week." "He'll want more than that, Mike. The intelligence picture is evolving rapidly. There's increasing evidence that Typhoon production is being accelerated. Then we'll accelerate too. But I won't promise miracles, Alex. This is complex engineering. It can't be rushed beyond certain limits." After hanging up, Harrington sat in the thought for several minutes. The pressure from Washington suggested factors beyond what he'd been told. Something was driving the urgency at the highest levels. His contemplation was interrupted by Lieutenant Weiss, who entered his office with a tablet in hand. "Sir, I've been analyzing the Typhoon's electronic warfare capabilities based on the intel. There's something you should see." She placed the tablet before him, displaying a technical schematic. "This is the estimated electronic signature of the Typhoon during operations. Notice anything unusual?" Harrington studied the diagram. "It's remarkably low, almost stealth-like." "Exactly. They've incorporated advanced signature reduction technology. It's not just about avoiding radar detection. They're minimizing all electronic emissions except when actively targeting. It makes them extremely difficult to detect until they're practically on top of you, which negates our traditional advantage in long-range detection and engagement," Harrington concluded. "We've always relied on seeing the enemy before they see us." "Yes, sir, and there's more. The Typhoon appears to be equipped with a sophisticated electronic countermeasures suite that can potentially disrupt our targeting systems at close range." Harrington leaned back, absorbing the implications. "So they get close using signature reduction, then blind our systems when we try to engage." "That's our assessment, sir." Harrington thought for a moment. "Lieutenant, I want you to form a dedicated electronic warfare team. Pull whoever you need from the current roster. Your mission is twofold: develop countermeasures against Typhoon's stealth capabilities and ensure Centaur has similar signature reduction features." Weiss nodded, clearly pleased with the assignment. "I'll get started immediately, sir." As she turned to leave, Harrington added, "And Weiss, I want daily updates. This could be the most critical aspect of the entire project." By evening, the facility hummed with renewed purpose. Engineers worked in shifts, implementing Harrington's design modifications. The prototype was partially disassembled, its suspension system undergoing radical reconfiguration. Reynolds, despite his initial resistance, had thrown himself into the challenge, his competitive nature seemingly sparked by the impossible deadline. Harrington made one final tour of the work areas before retiring for the night. In the main engineering bay, he found Sergeant Rodriguez examining the Centaur's weapon system with methodical care. "Problem, Sergeant?" Harrington asked. Rodriguez straightened to attention. "Just thinking, sir, this 105mm is a good gun, but against the Typhoon's armor profile, it might not provide first-round kill probability at extended ranges. What would you suggest?" "A 120mm like the Abrams carries would be ideal, but the weight and recoil management would be problematic on this chassis. Maybe something in between? The Germans have been developing a 115mm smoothbore that offers better penetration while keeping weight manageable." Harrington considered the suggestion. "Draft a proposal. Include performance specs and integration challenges. I want it on my desk tomorrow." "Yes, sir." As Harrington walked back to his quarters under the Maryland night sky, he found himself energized despite the day's challenges. This was what he did best: taking disparate elements, military and technological, and forging them into an effective fighting system. For all the frustrations and political complexities, there was a purity to the work that satisfied something deep in his warrior's soul. In his quarters, he found another envelope had been slipped under his door. The same plain paper, the same typeface. This time the message was longer. "The enemy knows your every move. Trust no one, especially those closest to the project. Typhoon was born from American research. The traitor remains active." Harrington read the message twice before carefully burning it in the small metal trash can. The ashes confirmed what his instincts had already suggested. Someone with intimate knowledge of both the Centaur project and Typhoon was trying to communicate with him. Someone who couldn't or wouldn't use official channels. Someone who believed there was a traitor within the project itself. Harrington lay awake late into the night, his mind working through the possibilities and implications. If the message was true, everything they did at Aberdeen might be compromised. Every design change, every test result potentially flowing directly to the enemy. But who was the traitor? Reynolds with his resistance to Harrington's leadership? Hayes with her access to all aspects of the project? One of the countless engineers or support staff? Or was the note itself a form of psychological warfare, designed to create paranoia and disrupt the project from within? Harrington had faced enemy tanks, artillery barrages in the fog of war. But this unseen threat, this shadow game of espionage and betrayal, was a different kind of battle, one where the enemy might be sitting across the conference table, smiling while passing secrets to America's adversaries. As dawn broke, Harrington made his decision. He would proceed as if the warning was genuine, but tell no one of his suspicions. He would watch and wait, looking for patterns and inconsistencies. And he would build redundancies and deceptions into the Centaur project, creating elements known only to himself. It would be a chess game played in shadows. And Iron Mike Harrington had no intention of losing. Morning light filtered through the blinds as Colonel Michael Harrington reviewed the night's engineering reports. His first week commanding the Centaur initiative had produced tangible results. The vehicle's suspension had been completely redesigned, reducing oscillation by 40%. The fire control system now maintained target lock at speeds up to 35 miles per hour. Not perfect, but progress. He reached for his coffee, grimacing at the lukewarm liquid. 4 hours of sleep had become his new normal. The persistent warnings about a traitor within the project had made him cautious about delegating critical decisions. Trust no one. The anonymous note's words echoed in his mind daily. A knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Mr. Marcus Reynolds appeared, carrying a thick binder of technical specifications. The chief engineer looked as tired as Harrington felt, dark circles shadowing his eyes. The modified suspension designs are ready for fabrication, Reynolds announced, placing the binder on Harrington's desk. We've incorporated your suggestions about terrain adaptation systems. If they perform as projected, we'll see a 60% improvement in stability during cross-country movement. Harrington nodded, noting the shift in Reynolds' tone. Gone was the academic condescension of their first meetings, replaced by professional respect, albeit reluctantly given. How soon can we test? Assembly begins today. We should have a functional prototype by Thursday. Make it Wednesday. Reynolds didn't argue. I'll adjust the schedule. As the engineer turned to leave, Harrington added, Dr. Reynolds, your team has done exceptional work. Please convey my appreciation. Surprise flickered across Reynolds' face before he composed himself. Thank you, Colonel. I'll let them know. After Reynolds departed, Harrington returned to his review of the project's personnel files. He'd been systematically evaluating everyone connected with Centaur, looking for inconsistencies that might reveal the alleged infiltrator. So far, nothing conclusive had emerged. Background checks were impeccable. Security protocols followed meticulously. Yet someone was feeding information to the enemy. The most recent intelligence briefing confirmed that Typhoon's design was evolving to counter specific features of Centaur, even features that had only recently been implemented. His secure phone buzzed. General Wilson's name appeared on the display. Harrington, Mike, we have a situation. Wilson's voice was tight, controlled. New intelligence came in overnight. Typhoon has entered limited production. First units expected to be operational within 6 months. Harrington absorbed the news. 6 months, not 18. The timeline had compressed dramatically. That's not possible, not unless they've been planning this for years. That's exactly what we believe happened. This isn't a reaction to current geopolitical conditions. It's a long-term strategy that's now entering its final phase. What's the Pentagon's response? The Secretary has ordered Centaur's timeline accelerated. He wants a field-ready prototype in 3 months, not 6. Full production to begin immediately thereafter. Alex, that's not realistic. We're making progress, but engineering physics can't be rushed beyond certain limits. Find a way, Mike. The alternative is sending our men and women into battle against a superior platform. I don't need to tell you what that means. Harrington thought of his son, Thomas, commanding a tank platoon that would face these new threats. No, you don't. There's more, Wilson continued. The Secretary has authorized bringing in additional resources, a specialist consultant with unique knowledge of enemy capabilities. Harrington's instincts sharpened. Who? James Keller. The name hit Harrington like a physical blow. James Keller, former lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, once Harrington's closest friend and fellow tank commander during Desert Storm. Later, America's most damaging military defector in decades. Keller is a traitor, Alex. He sold classified weapons data to foreign powers. He's also the foremost expert on Typhoon systems. He helped design its predecessor, which he did after betraying his country and his oath. Wilson sighed audibly. I understand your feelings, Mike, but this comes directly from the Secretary. Keller has been granted limited immunity in exchange for his cooperation. He arrives at Aberdeen tomorrow. Harrington's grip tightened on the phone. This is a mistake. It's not your call. Make it work. Wilson's tone softened slightly. For what it's worth, Keller will have restricted access. He won't be privy to Centaur's most sensitive systems. Consider him a technical consultant, nothing more. After ending the call, Harrington sat motionless, memories flooding back unbidden. James Keller had been more than a colleague. They had served together through multiple deployments, saved each other's lives in combat, stood as groomsmen at each other's weddings. Harrington had been godfather to Keller's son. Then came the fateful deployment during Desert Storm, their tank platoons assigned to the same assault element for the push into Iraq. The night before the offensive, Keller had argued vehemently against the attack plan, claiming the intelligence was flawed, the enemy stronger than reported. Harrington had dismissed the concerns, trusting the command's assessment. The resulting engagement became known as the Battle of 73 Easting, a decisive American victory. Harrington's tank destroyed 6 enemy vehicles, earning him the Silver Star. But Keller's platoon had veered off course, failing to provide expected support. 3 tanks from another company died in the gap. Their crews lost. The investigation revealed Keller had deliberately altered his route based on his own intelligence assessment. He was relieved of command, his career effectively over. 6 months later, he disappeared. 2 years after that, intelligence confirmed he had defected, taking with him detailed knowledge of American armored warfare doctrine and technology. And now James Keller was returning to American soil, granted immunity to help counter a threat he likely helped create. The door opened without a knock. Dr. Hayes entered, her expression grave. "You've heard about Keller," she said. Not a question. "Wilson just informed me." "I fought against this, Colonel, for what it's worth." Harrington studied her carefully. Was Hayes sincere, or was this theater? Could she be the infiltrator the notes had warned about? "Your objections are noted, Doctor, but we have our orders." "How do you want to handle this with the team?" "Transparency. Tell them exactly who Keller is and why he's here. Make it clear his access is restricted and all his communications monitored." Hayes nodded. "And your history with him?" "Is irrelevant to this mission." Harrington stood, signaling the conversation's end. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for tomorrow's suspension tests." The remainder of the day passed in a blur of technical reviews and prototype inspections. Harrington deliberately immersed himself in engineering details, focusing on problems that could be solved rather than the looming complication of Keller's arrival. The modified Centaur was taking shape, its form evolving daily as new components replaced old, the vehicle transforming from an awkward compromise into a focused weapon system. In the main assembly bay, Sergeant Rodriguez was supervising the installation of the newly designed weapons mount, a system that would allow the 115mm gun to maintain target lock while traveling at speed across broken terrain. "How's it looking, Sergeant?" Harrington asked, approaching the partially disassembled turret. Rodriguez straightened. "Better than expected, sir. The new hydraulic dampers are more responsive than the original design. Preliminary tests show a 30% reduction in targeting latency." "What about ammunition handling? Any progress on the autoloader issues?" "We've abandoned the fully automated system, sir. Too many failure points. The modified design requires a human loader, but provides mechanical assistance for the heavier rounds. Faster, more reliable, and less prone to jamming." Harrington nodded approvingly. "Sometimes the old ways are best." "That's what my father used to say." Rodriguez smiled slightly. "He was a tanker, too. M60s in Germany during the Cold War. Good machines, the Pattons. Not as sophisticated as what came later, but reliable." "That's what he said you'd appreciate about them, sir." Harrington raised an eyebrow. "Your father knew me?" "Served under you briefly. Technical Sergeant Manuel Rodriguez. 3rd Battalion, 5th Cavalry. He always said Colonel Harrington understood that tanks were just metal boxes until good men made them weapons. The connection surprised Harrington. I remember him. Excellent mechanic. Could coax an engine back to life with nothing but profanity and determination. Rodriguez laughed. That sounds like him. He passed 5 years ago. Cancer. But he'd be proud to know I'm working with you now. The personal connection reinforced Harrington's sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about military hardware or strategic advantage. It was about the sons and daughters of America who would rely on Centaur to bring them home alive. We won't let him down, Sergeant. That evening, Harrington called his son Thomas from the secure line in his office. How are things at Fort Hood? He asked after they exchanged greetings. Busy. We're running extended field exercises. Nobody's saying why, but the ops tempo has doubled in the last week. Harrington frowned. The increased training schedule suggested preparation for potential deployment. Any word on where you might be headed? Nothing official. Rumors about Eastern Europe or the Middle East, but that's standard barracks talk. How's your tank performing? The Abrams, same as always. Best damn machine ever built. Thomas paused. Until whatever you're working on replaces it, I suppose. Harrington smiled despite his concerns. Don't write off the Abrams just yet. It'll be in service for years to come. But something's coming, isn't it? Something we need to be ready for. The question probed dangerous territory. Thomas didn't have clearance for details about Typhoon or the compressed timeline. There are always threats, son. That's why we train. A silence fell between them, filled with things Harrington couldn't say. That his son's unit might soon face an enemy equipped with weapons specifically designed to defeat American armor. That the margin for survival would depend on the work being done at Aberdeen. Dad, Thomas said finally, be careful. Some of the intelligence officers have been asking questions about your current assignment. Oddly specific questions. Harrington's attention sharpened. What kind of questions? About your command style, decision-making patterns, how you handled tank platoon tactics during Desert Storm. It felt like they were building a profile. Who exactly was asking? A Major Davies said he was from Pentagon Intelligence Assessment. Harrington made a mental note of the name. Probably routine background for my current assignment. Maybe. Thomas didn't sound convinced. Just watch yourself. Something doesn't feel right. After ending the call, Harrington sat in the darkened office, turning over this new information. Why would intelligence officers be profiling his tactical approaches now, weeks after his assignment to Centaur? And why ask his son rather than review the extensive documentation of his career? Unless they were looking for insights not found in official records, patterns and tendencies known only to those closest to him, or unless there was no Major Davies and someone else was gathering intelligence using false credentials. The implications troubled him deeply. He needed more information, but asking too many questions might alert whoever was behind the inquiries. He left his office and walked through the facility's deserted corridors to the prototyping bay. The partially assembled Centaur loomed in the dimly lit space, its angular form somehow predatory even in repose. Couldn't sleep either? The voice startled him. Lieutenant Weiss emerged from behind the vehicle, a tablet computer in her hand. Running diagnostics on the electronic warfare suite, she explained, gesturing to the exposed circuitry in the Centaur's turret. Fewer interruptions at night. Harrington nodded. Find anything interesting? Actually, yes. She handed him the tablet. The signal processing algorithms have been subtly modified from the original specifications. The changes are almost imperceptible, but they create a vulnerability in the electronic countermeasure systems. What kind of vulnerability? A specific frequency pattern could potentially bypass our jamming capabilities. It's incredibly sophisticated, something you would only notice if you were specifically looking for it. Harrington studied the technical data. Who had access to these systems? That's the troubling part. These changes were implemented during the initial design phase, before you took command. They're buried so deep in the code architecture that we only found them while doing a complete systems rebuild. Can it be fixed? Already done. Weiss looked grim. But sir, this wasn't an accident or a design flaw. This was deliberate. Someone wanted Centaur to be vulnerable to specific electronic countermeasures. The evidence of sabotage confirmed Harrington's worst fears. The project had been compromised from the beginning, the traitor operating long before Harrington's arrival. Keep this between us for now, Lieutenant. Continue your audit of all systems. I want to know if there are other surprises waiting to be discovered. Yes, sir. Weiss hesitated. Colonel, with Keller arriving tomorrow, should we be concerned about further compromises? Keller will be watched every moment. But yes, we should be concerned. about him and potentially others. The lieutenant's expression hardened. My father served in Vietnam. He taught me that in combat, you trust your squad with your life. But in intelligence work, you trust no one completely. Your father was a wise man. Harrington returned to his quarters shortly after midnight, his mind racing with implications and contingencies. The sabotage Weiss had discovered, combined with the intelligence gathering Thomas had reported, painted a disturbing picture. Their adversary wasn't just developing a competing weapon system. They were specifically targeting Centaur and more personally targeting Harrington himself. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of burning tanks and betrayed comrades. He awoke before dawn, a sense of foreboding hanging over him like a storm cloud. Keller would arrive today, the man who had once been like a brother to him, the man who had betrayed everything they both held sacred. Harrington dressed methodically in his combat uniform rather than the casual clothes he'd adopted at Aberdeen. Today wasn't about engineering or management. It was about confronting a traitor. He wanted the full weight of his rank and authority visible in every interaction. The facility was unusually quiet when he arrived. Staff moved efficiently but spoke in hushed tones. Everyone knew who was coming and what it represented. Hayes met him in the main conference room, accompanied by two military police officers in full tactical gear. Keller arrives at 0900, she informed him. He'll be escorted directly here for initial briefing, then to the restricted laboratory for technical consultation. Who authorized the lab access? Harrington demanded. General Wilson, sir. Keller is to review our electronic countermeasures and targeting systems, specifically to identify potential vulnerabilities to Typhoon's capabilities. The very systems we just found were compromised. Hayes looked startled. What? Harrington briefly explained Weiss's discovery, watching Hayes carefully for her reaction. Genuine surprise or carefully crafted deception? Impossible to tell. This changes everything, Hayes said. We should delay Keller's arrival until we can complete a full systems audit. Too late. He's already in transit, and perhaps it's better this way. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Sir, with respect, allowing a known defector access to Centaur under these circumstances seems extremely risky, which is why I've implemented additional security protocols. Harrington handed her a folder. Effective immediately, all technical information is compartmentalized. No single person has access to complete system specifications, daily code audits on all electronic systems, and Lieutenant Weiss will personally monitor all of Keller's activities. Hayes reviewed the protocols. The secretary won't like these restrictions. The secretary isn't here, I am. And until relieved of command, I will take every measure necessary to protect this project. At precisely 0900, the facility's security system announced the arrival of a visitor at the main gate. Harrington watched on the monitor as a black SUV with government plates passed through 3 security checkpoints before stopping at the building's entrance. 4 armed guards escorted a single man into the facility. Even through the grainy security feed, Harrington recognized him immediately. James Keller had aged, his once dark hair now silver, his tall frame somewhat stooped. But he moved with the same deliberate confidence Harrington remembered from their days commanding tanks together. Bring him to the conference room, Harrington instructed the security team. Full search protocols, no electronics, no recording devices. Hayes studied him. Do you want me to handle the initial briefing, given your history? No, this is my responsibility. Harrington positioned himself at the head of the conference table, standing rather than sitting, establishing dominance in the space. When the door opened and Keller entered, flanked by guards, Harrington found himself face to face with his former friend for the first time in over 20 years. Neither man spoke for a long moment. The guards took positions near the door, hands near their weapons. Hello, Mike, Keller finally said, his voice raspier than Harrington remembered. You look well. Wish I could say the same, James. A slight smile touched Keller's lips. Still direct as ever. Some things never change. And some people change too much. Harrington gestured to a chair. Sit. We have work to do, and the less time you spend in this facility, the better. Keller sat, placing his hands on the table where they could be seen. No wedding ring, Harrington noted. Whether divorced or widowed, the man had lost the wife who had once been like family. I understand your anger, Keller began. You understand nothing about me, not anymore. I know you're developing a counterpart to Typhoon. I know you're behind schedule and facing technological challenges. And I know without my help, American soldiers will die when they face Typhoon in combat. Harrington leaned forward. Let's be clear about something. You are here because the Secretary of Defense believes your technical knowledge outweighs your treachery. I disagree. You will provide the specific information requested, nothing more. You will have no input on Centaur's fundamental design or operational doctrine. Still the battlefield commander, giving orders and expecting immediate compliance. Keller shook his head. The world has changed, Mike. Warfare has changed. The days of mass tank formations charging across open terrain are over. Typhoon represents the future. Smaller, faster, networked platforms that strike and disappear. Save the philosophy for your memoirs, traitor. Tell me about Typhoon's electronic warfare capabilities. Keller's expression hardened at the insult, but he composed himself quickly. Its electronic suite is based on American technology I helped develop before leaving. It can detect, classify, and jam most NATO targeting systems within a 15-kilometer radius. More importantly, it can selectively target individual vehicles, disrupting communications between units. Specifics on the jamming frequencies and methods. I'll need to see your current electronic countermeasure specifications to provide meaningful input. Harrington smiled coldly. Not happening. You'll provide general technical parameters. Our engineers will determine applicable countermeasures. That's not what I agreed to with the secretary. Take it or return to whatever hole you've been hiding in for the past 20 years. The tension between them was palpable. Hayes, who had remained silent during the exchange, finally intervened. Perhaps we could compromise. Dr. Keller could review our electronic warfare simulations without access to the actual code or hardware. Harrington considered this acceptable, but all his observations are recorded and reviewed before implementation. Keller nodded slowly. I can work with that. For the next 3 hours, they engaged in a careful dance of information exchange. Keller provided insights into Typhoon's capabilities, some of which confirmed existing intelligence, others revealing new concerns. Harrington pressed for details on vulnerabilities, weak points that Centaur could exploit. Throughout, they maintained a frigid professionalism that barely concealed the history between them. The most significant advantage Typhoon possesses is its distributed sensor network, Keller explained, pointing to a diagram he'd sketched. Each vehicle acts as a node in a battlefield mesh. They share targeting data instantaneously, meaning if one Typhoon identifies a target, all Typhoons in the network can engage it, even without direct line of sight. Networked warfare, Harrington mused, hardly revolutionary. The implementation is, Typhoon's network is designed to function even in heavily jammed environments. It uses frequency hopping protocols derived from stealth aircraft technology. Can it be disrupted? Theoretically, yes, but you'd need precise knowledge of the algorithmic patterns, and those change regularly based on mission parameters. Harrington made notes as Keller spoke, searching for inconsistencies or deliberate misdirection. So far, the information aligned with intelligence assessments, but something felt off. Keller was being too helpful, too forthcoming. What about crew configuration? Harrington asked abruptly, changing topics. 3-person, commander, gunner, driver, most functions automated. Crew survival probability when hit? Keller hesitated, the question clearly touching on sensitive ground. Lower than American standards would accept. Approximately 60% in frontal impacts, 30% from side angles. They're sacrificing crew protection for mobility and firepower. Yes, but they're also reducing exposure through tactics. Typhoon never stays in one position long enough to be targeted effectively. It fires and moves constantly. The briefing continued until early afternoon when Harrington called a recess. Guards escorted Keller to a secure room for a meal break, leaving Harrington and Hayes alone to assess what they'd learned. His technical knowledge is impressive, Hayes acknowledged, and most of what he's shared aligns with our intelligence. Most, but not all, Harrington pointed out. He's downplaying Typhoon's armor vulnerabilities and exaggerating its electronic warfare capabilities. The question is why? To make it seem more formidable than it is, psychological warfare? Or to influence our design priorities, push us toward a heavier electronic warfare focus at the expense of other capabilities? Hayes considered this. What's your assessment of his true agenda? Harrington thought carefully before answering. James Keller is playing a game within a game. He's here because he wants to be here, not because he had no choice. The immunity deal is a cover for something else. You think he's still actively working for the enemy? I think James never does anything without multiple layers of purpose. He's providing enough legitimate information to establish credibility, while seeding subtle disinformation to influence our decisions. Should we terminate his involvement? Harrington shook his head. No, let him continue, but we'll verify everything independently and feed him carefully selected information about Centaur. Let him think he's learning our vulnerabilities. After lunch, Keller was escorted to a simulation laboratory where he could review Centaur's electronic warfare capabilities without accessing actual hardware. Lieutenant Weiss was assigned as his technical liaison, her background in electronic countermeasures, making her the ideal monitor for his activities. Harrington observed through a one-way glass as Keller methodically analyzed the simulations, occasionally making suggestions that Weiss documented. His expertise was undeniable, his insights potentially valuable. But Harrington couldn't shake the conviction that Keller's assistance was a Trojan horse, offering apparent benefits while concealing hidden dangers. Late in the afternoon, Harrington received an urgent call from Reynolds. The chief engineer's voice crackled with excitement. "Colonel, you need to see this. We've completed the first full assembly of the modified suspension and mobility systems. Preliminary tests show performance exceeding specifications." On my way. In the testing bay, Reynolds and his team had mounted the Centaur's redesigned chassis on a hydraulic simulation platform that could reproduce various terrain conditions. Massive pistons pumped, recreating the effects of rough ground at different speeds. "We've achieved stability at 45 miles per hour over broken terrain," Reynolds announced proudly as Harrington entered. 50% better than our target. Harrington watched the test rig in action, noting the significantly reduced oscillation compared to previous designs. "What about targeting capability during movement?" "That's the best part." Reynolds led him to a computer display showing targeting accuracy metrics. The new stabilization system maintains target lock with less than 1 mil deviation at full speed. That's near stationary accuracy while moving. For the first time since taking command of the project, Harrington felt genuine optimism. The Centaur was evolving into a formidable weapon system, one that could potentially match or exceed Typhoon's capabilities. "Schedule a full mobility test for tomorrow," he instructed. "I want to see the prototype on actual terrain." "We're still integrating the turret systems," Reynolds cautioned. "The vehicle won't be combat capable for another week. Mobility first, then firepower. Let's validate the suspension and drive systems before moving forward." As they discussed the test protocols, Harrington became aware of a commotion near the entrance to the bay. Turning, he saw Keller being escorted in by Weiss and the security detail. "What is he doing here?" Harrington demanded. "This area is restricted." Weiss looked uncomfortable. "General Wilson called directly, sir. He ordered that Dr. Keller be given a complete tour of the facility, including the prototype." Harrington's jaw tightened. "Wait here." He strode across the bay, positioning himself between Keller and the Centaur prototype. "This wasn't part of our agreement." "Plans change," Keller replied calmly. "The secretary believes my input will be more valuable if I understand the complete system." "The secretary isn't here." "No, but General Wilson is his direct representative. You can call him if you'd like confirmation." Harrington studied his former friend's face, searching for clues to his true intentions. Keller maintained a neutral expression, but there was something in his eyes, anticipation, triumph. "Lieutenant Weiss will accompany you at all times," Harrington finally said. "You will not touch any component. You will not take notes or measurements. You will observe only what Dr. Reynolds chooses to show you." "Understood." Reynolds led Keller on a carefully choreographed tour of the prototype, explaining the suspension system and mobility enhancements without revealing the more sensitive aspects of the design. Harrington watched every moment, noting what captured Keller's attention and what he seemed to dismiss. "Impressive work," Keller commented as the tour concluded. "The hydropneumatic suspension is particularly innovative, similar to what we developed for the Future Combat System before Congress canceled the program. With significant modifications," Reynolds noted, "our system adjusts dynamically to terrain conditions in real time, something the FCS never achieved." "Of course," Keller smiled slightly, "though I suspect Typhoon has similar capabilities." The casual mention of Typhoon's specific features raised Harrington's suspicions further. Was Keller deliberately comparing the two systems to gauge Centaur's progress? Or was he subtly suggesting that everything they were developing had already been matched by their adversary? As the day's work concluded, Keller was escorted from the facility with arrangements to return the following morning. Once he was gone, Harrington called an emergency meeting with his core team, Hayes, Reynolds, Weiss, and Rodriguez. "From this moment forward, we operate under the assumption that all information shared with Keller will reach our adversary," Harrington began. "That means we need a parallel development track, one that he never sees." "A decoy program?" Hayes asked. Not exactly. We'll continue the current development path, but with specific modifications that we'll implement after Keller's consultation ends. Lieutenant Weiss, I want you to create a separate electronic warfare suite that will counter the capabilities Keller described today, but keep it entirely isolated from the systems he's reviewing. Weiss nodded. I can establish a secure development environment. Small team, compartmentalized information. Dr. Reynolds, accelerate the weapons integration. Keller believes we're at least a week from mounting the main gun. I want it operational in 3 days. Possible, but we'll need to work around the clock. Make it happen. Sergeant Rodriguez, you're responsible for ammunition handling systems. Keep them completely separate from what Keller sees. Yes, sir. Harrington turned to Hayes. Doctor, I need you to manage Keller's access and information flow. Feed him the narrative we want him to take back to his handlers. What narrative is that, Colonel? That we're building exactly the vehicle they expect us to build. Heavy, defensive, reactive rather than proactive. Let him think Centaur will be fighting the last war, not the next one. The meeting concluded with detailed assignments and security protocols. As the team dispersed, Harrington felt the weight of command pressing down on him. He was playing a dangerous game of counterintelligence against a man who knew him better than almost anyone. If he miscalculated, American lives would be the cost. That evening, Harrington drove to a small diner 20 miles from Aberdeen, well away from the facility's security perimeter. He'd chosen the location carefully, a place unlikely to be monitored by either friendly or hostile intelligence services. Thomas was already waiting in a booth near the back, wearing civilian clothes as instructed. Father and son embraced briefly before sitting. Thanks for coming on short notice, Harrington said, keeping his voice low despite the relative privacy. Your message sounded urgent. What's going on, Dad? Harrington weighed his words carefully. He couldn't share classified details about Centaur or Typhoon, but he needed information only Thomas could provide. Tell me more about Major Davies, the intelligence officer who was asking about me. Thomas frowned. Not much to tell. He showed up at the battalion headquarters 3 days ago, said he was conducting a routine assessment of command structures, started asking specifically about your tank tactics during Desert Storm. Physical description? Mid-40s, about 6 feet, gray at the temples, wireframe glasses, spoke with a slight Midwestern accent, maybe Chicago. Did he meet with anyone else in the unit? Several of the senior NCOs, particularly those who served under you in previous assignments. Harrington processed this information. Did he ask about specific engagements or general approaches? Very specific. He wanted details about how you handled the 73 Easting battle, your decision-making process, how you deployed your platoon. Even asked if I remembered stories you'd told about it. And you told him what? Thomas looked offended. Nothing he couldn't get from the official reports. Dad, what's this about? Who is this guy? I'm not entirely sure, Harrington admitted, but I don't believe he's from Pentagon intelligence. There's no reason for that kind of assessment now, years after the fact. You think he's gathering intelligence on you personally? Wait, Harrington considered how much to reveal. I'm working on a sensitive project, one with significant national security implications. Someone may be trying to understand my approach to predict how I'll handle certain situations. Someone from our side or theirs. That's what I need to determine. Thomas leaned forward, lowering his voice further. Dad, should I be reporting this up my chain of command? Not yet. For now, if Davies or anyone else approaches you again, tell them nothing beyond what's in the public record, and let me know immediately. They spent the remainder of the meal discussing family matters, a deliberate shift to innocent topics in case anyone was observing their meeting. As they parted in the parking lot, Thomas embraced his father again. Watch your back, Dad. Whatever this is, it feels wrong. I always do, son. You too. Driving back to Aberdeen, Harrington's mind churned with possibilities. The timing of Davies' intelligence gathering coincided perfectly with Keller's appearance. Too perfectly to be coincidence. Was Keller behind the questioning? Or was someone else orchestrating events from the shadows? When he arrived at his quarters on base, Harrington found another anonymous note had been slipped under his door. Keller is not what he appears, neither is Hayes. Trust the sergeant. 73E was just the beginning. The cryptic message raised as many questions as it answered. Hayes was potentially compromised, but Rodriguez could be trusted? And what did 73 Easting have to do with current events, beyond the obvious connection to both Harrington and Keller's past? Sleep eluded him that night. He lay awake reviewing the complex web of relationships, motivations, and potential betrayals surrounding the Centaur project. By dawn, he had formulated a plan to flush out the traitor, using Keller's presence as a catalyst. It was a gamble, risking the very project he'd been entrusted to protect. But sometimes, as he'd learned in the deserts of Iraq, victory required calculated risk. The next morning brought clear skies and perfect conditions for the scheduled mobility test. The Centaur prototype had been transported to Aberdeen's cross-country course, a punishing 12-mile circuit of hills, ditches, mud pits, and simulated urban obstacles. Harrington arrived early, inspecting the vehicle personally before the test. The redesigned suspension looked robust, the enlarged wheel assemblies promising improved traction over difficult terrain. The turret remained partially disassembled, the main gun absent, but the chassis and mobility systems were complete. Reynolds joined him, clipboard in hand. All systems check out. We're ready when you are. Who's driving? Corporal Jenkins. He's logged the most simulator hours with the new configuration. Harrington shook his head. I'll drive. Reynolds looked startled. Sir, with respect, that's not protocol. The test parameters require consistent operator input for valid comparison to baseline data. Protocol's changing. I need to feel how it handles personally. Before Reynolds could protest further, Hayes arrived with Keller and his security escort. Colonel, Hayes greeted him. Dr. Keller has been authorized to observe today's test. General Wilson's orders. Of course they are, Harrington muttered. Louder, he added. Dr. Keller can observe from the command post. He will not approach the vehicle at any time. Keller offered a thin smile. Still prefer the hands-on approach, Mike? Some things never change. And some people never learn. Harrington turned back to Reynolds. I'm driving. Have Jenkins brief me on the control layout. 30 minutes later, Harrington was sealed inside the Centaur's driver compartment, familiarizing himself with the modernized controls. Unlike the tanks he'd commanded throughout his career, Centaur used a combination of traditional controls and digital interfaces. A heads-up display projected critical information onto a specialized windscreen, allowing the driver to monitor systems without looking down at instruments. Comms check, Reynolds' voice crackled through his headset. Receiving, Harrington confirmed. All systems show green. You are clear to begin the course at your discretion. Remember, this is a mobility test only. We're evaluating suspension performance and terrain adaptation, not speed records. Harrington allowed himself a small smile. Reynolds clearly knew his reputation for pushing vehicles to their limits. Understood. Beginning test run now. He engaged the hybrid electric drive system, feeling the powerful motors surge as the Centaur moved forward. The initial impression was one of restrained power, like a racehorse held to a trot. The steering responded with precision unusual for a vehicle of this size. The first obstacle was a series of moguls designed to test suspension articulation. Harrington increased speed gradually, feeling how the chassis responded to the uneven terrain. The hydropneumatic system adjusted in real time, maintaining a remarkably stable platform despite the challenging surface. Suspension performance exceeding expectations, Reynolds reported in his ear. Vertical oscillation 30% below threshold. Harrington pushed harder, taking the next section of moguls at 40 miles per hour. The ride remained controlled, the violent bouncing he'd expected notably absent. This thing handles like a sports car, he commented. Wait until you hit the mud pits, Reynolds replied. That's where the adaptive traction system really shines. The course progressed from moguls to a steep incline covered in loose gravel. Centaur's wheels sought purchase automatically, power shifting between them as sensors detected slip. The vehicle climbed smoothly to the summit, then descended the equally challenging downslope without the fishtailing that had plagued earlier designs. As Harrington navigated through increasingly difficult obstacles, his assessment of Centaur evolved. This wasn't just an incremental improvement over existing combat vehicles. It represented a fundamental shift in capability, combining tank-level firepower with unprecedented mobility. The mud pits proved Reynolds' point. Where traditional tracked vehicles might bog down, Centaur's intelligent traction system automatically adapted, maintaining forward momentum through viscous terrain that would stop most wheeled vehicles. Impressive, Harrington acknowledged as he emerged from the final pit. How's the power reserve? 78% remaining, Reynolds replied. The regenerative braking system is performing better than projected. The last segment of the course simulated urban combat conditions, with narrow passages between concrete barriers, sharp turns, and simulated debris. Here, Centaur's maneuverability proved decisive. The vehicle navigated spaces that would be impossible for a traditional tank. its tight turning radius and precise steering allowing Harrington to thread through gaps with mere inches to spare. As he completed the circuit and brought Centaur to a halt at the starting point, Harrington felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The machine he'd helped reshape was proving its worth, exceeding expectations in ways that could save American lives when deployed. He emerged from the driver's hatch to find the test team gathered around, expressions ranging from satisfied to jubilant. Reynolds approached with a tablet displaying performance metrics. "Congratulations, Colonel. You just set a course record for armored vehicles, and the suspension data shows we've achieved our stability targets across all terrain types." Harrington nodded, genuinely pleased. "The handling is exceptional, especially in the urban section. That kind of maneuverability changes the tactical equation completely." From the periphery of the group, Keller's voice cut in. "Impressive for a test circuit, but how will it perform against a prepared enemy who knows its capabilities?" Harrington turned to face his former friend. Keller stood with arms crossed, his security escorts maintaining a careful distance. "That depends on how much the enemy knows, doesn't it, James?" Harrington replied, the double meaning clear between them. "Every system has vulnerabilities," Keller continued, unperturbed. "Centaur's mobility is remarkable, but it comes at a cost. The wheel assemblies are exposed. One well-placed shot, and all that maneuverability becomes irrelevant." "We're aware of the trade-offs," Reynolds interjected. "Additional armor protection will be incorporated in the production model." Keller smiled thinly. "Armor that will reduce your speed and increase your weight? The eternal balance of protection versus mobility. Some problems have no perfect solution." "Some problems require new thinking, not perfect solutions," Harrington countered. "Centaur isn't designed to be invulnerable. It's designed to avoid being hit in the first place. Just like Typhoon." Keller's eyes locked with Harrington's. Two similar approaches to the same tactical problem. "I wonder which will prove superior when they meet." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Not if, but when the two systems would face each other in combat. "I believe we've seen enough for today," Hayes interrupted, sensing the rising tension. "Dr. Keller has other systems to review this afternoon." As Keller was escorted back toward the waiting vehicles, Harrington called after him. "James, one question." Keller paused, turning. "Yes? Why did you do it? Why betray everything and everyone?" For a moment, Keller's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "You still don't understand, do you, even after all these years? I didn't betray my country. My country betrayed me. Betrayed all of us who saw the truth about that night at 73 Easting." "What truth?" "We won a decisive victory." "Did we? Or did we slaughter retreating forces based on flawed intelligence? Forces that posed no strategic threat?" Keller's voice had risen, his control slipping. "3 crews died because command sent us into a situation they didn't understand. And when I tried to prevent more needless deaths, they ended my career. You disobeyed direct orders in combat. I saved lives, but the military needed heroes, not truth-tellers. So you became the decorated hero of 73 Easting, while I became the scapegoat." Keller composed himself with visible effort. "That's ancient history now. We both made our choices. Let's see which of us was right in the end." With that enigmatic statement, Keller turned and walked to the waiting vehicle. Harrington watched him go, troubled by the exchange. For the first time, he considered the possibility that Keller's defection had been motivated by something more complex than simple treachery, that perhaps there was a twisted logic behind his actions, a grievance nursed for decades until it curdled into betrayal. But whatever Keller's motivations, the threat he posed to the Centaur project remained very real. And Harrington was increasingly convinced that Keller was playing a role in a larger scheme, one that extended far beyond technical consultation. The remainder of the day was spent analyzing the test data and preparing for the next phase of development: weapons integration. With the mobility systems performing above expectations, the focus would shift to mounting and testing the 115mm main gun and its associated fire control systems. Late in the evening, as most staff had departed, Harrington found himself alone in the command center, reviewing security footage from the day's test. He studied Keller's reactions carefully, noting when his attention seemed most focused. What aspects of Centaur's performance appeared to surprise or concern him? A noise at the door made him look up. Sergeant Rodriguez entered, carrying a folder of technical specifications. "Sorry to disturb you, sir. I was told you wanted the ammunition handling protocols before tomorrow's meeting." "Yes, thank you, Sergeant." Harrington accepted the folder, then hesitated. Rodriguez, what do you know about Lieutenant Colonel James Keller? Only what's in the briefing, sir. Former U.S. Army officer who defected 20 years ago. Allegedly provided classified information to hostile powers. What's your assessment of him? Your personal impression? Rodriguez considered the question carefully. He knows his technology, sir. That's evident from his consultations. But there's something off about him. The way he watches everyone, not just observing, but calculating. Trust your instincts, Sergeant. They're usually right. Rodriguez nodded, then seemed to debate whether to speak further. Sir, there's something else you should know. Dr. Hayes has been accessing the secure server after hours, specifically reviewing the sections containing your personal notes and design modifications. The information confirmed Harrington's growing suspicions about Hayes. The anonymous note had warned him she wasn't what she appeared to be. How do you know this? I've been running passive monitoring on all system accesses since you took command. Standard security protocol for classified projects. But I expanded it based on the irregular patterns I was observing. Does Hayes know you're monitoring these accesses? No, sir. The system appears normal to regular users. Harrington made a decision. Continue monitoring, but expand your focus. I want to know every file accessed by every member of the senior team, including Dr. Reynolds and Lieutenant Weiss. And Sergeant, keep this between us for now. Understood, sir. After Rodriguez departed, Harrington sat in the darkened command center, the pieces of the puzzle slowly aligning in his mind. Hayes accessing his files after hours. Keller's carefully calibrated revelations about Typhoon. The mysterious intelligence officer questioning his son about 73 Easting. The anonymous notes warning of betrayal from within. Someone was orchestrating events, manipulating the Centaur project toward an unknown but almost certainly destructive end. And at the center of it all, somehow, was the Battle of 73 Easting, the engagement that had defined both his and Keller's careers. What had really happened that night in the Iraqi desert? The official record documented a triumphant American victory, but Keller clearly believed something else had occurred, something significant enough to turn him against his country. Harrington had never questioned the narrative. His own experiences that night were clear. Detecting and engaging Iraqi forces, destroying 6 enemy tanks in rapid succession, pressing the attack according to the battle plan. But he'd been focused on his sector, his tank, his crew. What had Keller seen or experienced that was so different? For the first time in decades, Harrington allowed himself to consider that there might be aspects of that night he didn't fully understand, that perhaps Keller's subsequent actions, while unforgivable, weren't entirely irrational. This line of thought led to an uncomfortable possibility. What if the current situation, the development of Typhoon in the compromised Centaur project, was somehow connected to events from 30 years ago? What if Keller's return wasn't just about technical consultation, but about resolving unfinished business from their shared past? As midnight approached, Harrington made a decision. He would confront Keller privately, away from Hayes and the others. Force a conversation about the real agenda behind his presence at Aberdeen. It was a risk, potentially exposing his suspicions prematurely, but Harrington sensed time was running out. The accelerated Typhoon production schedule, the increasing pressure from the Pentagon, the evidence of internal sabotage, all pointed to a rapidly closing window of opportunity. Tomorrow, he would take action. One way or another, he would uncover the truth behind the web of deception surrounding the Centaur initiative. And he would do whatever necessary to protect American forces from the threat that Keller represented, regardless of their shared history or the complex motivations that might lie beneath the surface of betrayal. The chess game was approaching its critical middle stage, and Michael Harrington had no intention of being a passive piece on someone else's board. Dawn broke over Aberdeen Proving Ground, painting the eastern sky in shades of crimson and gold. Colonel Michael Harrington stood at his office window, watching as the first rays of sunlight glinted off the Centaur prototype in the testing yard below. The vehicle looked different now, more complete. The 115mm main gun had been mounted overnight, its long barrel jutting forward like an accusing finger. Today was the moment of truth, the first live fire test of the complete weapon system. If successful, it would represent a major milestone for the project. If it failed, the Pentagon might reconsider its commitment entirely. Harrington's phone buzzed, a text from his son Thomas. "Be careful today. Major Davies was asking more questions. Something's happening." The warning confirmed Harrington's growing sense that events were accelerating toward some unseen climax. the mysterious Major Davies, Keller's unexplained return, Hayes's suspicious after-hours activities, all pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite assemble. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter." Lieutenant Weiss appeared, her expression grave. "Sir, we have a problem with the targeting system. The integration codes have been altered." "Altered how?" "Someone modified the targeting parameters overnight. The changes would have caused a 2-degree deviation in the main gun alignment. Not enough to be obvious in preliminary tests, but enough to ensure consistent misses in combat." "Sabotage." "Yes, sir, and sophisticated. Whoever did this knew exactly what to change and how to hide their tracks. I only found it because we were running a line-by-line verification this morning." Harrington's jaw tightened. "Can you fix it before the test?" "Already done, but, sir, this is the third attempt at sabotage we've detected. The other systems might be compromised in ways we haven't discovered yet." "Who had access to the targeting systems overnight?" Weiss hesitated. "That's the problem. According to the security logs, only 3 people entered the secure code room: Dr. Reynolds, Dr. Hayes, and Sergeant Rodriguez. 3 of his core team members. 3 people he had been working alongside for weeks." Harrington felt the weight of command pressing down on him. "Trust no one." The anonymous warnings echoed in his mind. "Keep this between us for now, Lieutenant. Double-check every system before the test firing. Personally." "Yes, sir. There's something else you should know. General Wilson is flying in for today's demonstration, and he's bringing the Secretary of Defense with him." The news raised the stakes exponentially. A successful demonstration before the Secretary could secure Centaur's future. A failure could doom it. "Time of arrival?" "Their helicopter lands at 0900. Test firing is scheduled for 1100. Harrington checked his watch. Just over 4 hours to uncover any remaining sabotage and ensure the demonstration succeeded. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Carry on with the system checks." After Weiss departed, Harrington locked his office door and retrieved a small notebook from his inside pocket. In it, he documented every suspicious incident since taking command of the project, creating a web of connections and possibilities. He added the latest targeting system sabotage to the list, then studied the pattern. 3 primary suspects had emerged: Hayes, with her late-night access to secure files; Reynolds, whose initial resistance to Harrington's leadership had seemed excessive; and now potentially Rodriguez, who had access to the compromised targeting systems. But why would any of them sabotage a project they'd invested so much in creating? What was the larger game? His secure phone rang, displaying a number he didn't recognize. "Harrington, 30 minutes. The fishing pier at the southern testing range. Come alone." Keller's voice, unmistakable despite the poor connection. "Why would I meet you privately?" "Because I know who the traitor is, and because I'm not who you think I am." The line went dead. Harrington stared at the phone, weighing his options. This could be a trap. Keller might be planning to eliminate him before the crucial demonstration. Or he might actually have information vital to the project's success. The decision took only moments. Harrington secured his sidearm in its holster, left a coded message for Weiss about his whereabouts, and took a Humvee from the motor pool. The southern range was isolated, used primarily for long-distance artillery testing. The perfect place for a private conversation or an ambush. He parked a quarter-mile from the fishing pier, approaching the last section on foot, senses alert for any sign of danger. The pier extended 50 yards into the Chesapeake Bay, and at its end stood a solitary figure. James Keller, hands visible at his sides, apparently unarmed. "You came alone, good." Keller's voice carried across the still morning air. "Start talking." Harrington kept a measured distance between them, hand near his holster. "What do you know about Operation Diamondback?" The question caught Harrington off guard. Classified DARPA initiative, Advanced Armor Systems Development, discontinued in 2007. What about it? That's the official story. The reality was different. Diamondback was a deep-cover counterintelligence operation designed to feed specific technological misinformation to our adversaries. I was recruited specifically because of my engineering background and combat experience. Harrington frowned. "You expect me to believe your defection was sanctioned, part of some elaborate intelligence operation?" "Not initially. My departure was genuine. After 73 Easting, after they destroyed my career, I accepted an offer from foreign interests. But 6 months later, U.S. intelligence approached me. They saw an opportunity to position an asset deep within enemy weapons development. I became a double agent. The claim was outlandish, yet delivered with such conviction that Harrington found himself listening despite his skepticism. You're saying for 20 years you've been working for American intelligence while pretending to help our enemies develop weapon systems? Exactly. Feeding them just enough real information to maintain my cover while ensuring critical vulnerabilities were built into everything I helped create, including Typhoon. Harrington's tactical mind processed the implications. If true, this would explain much about the current situation. But it seemed too convenient, too perfect an explanation. Prove it. Keller reached slowly into his jacket, removing a small flash drive. This contains validation codes that can be verified through secure Pentagon channels. It also contains the complete schematics for Typhoon, including deliberately engineered weaknesses in its electronic warfare systems and armor distribution. He tossed the drive to Harrington, who caught it reflexively. Why reveal this now? Why not work through official channels? Keller's expression darkened. Because someone within the U.S. military establishment has discovered my true role. Someone highly placed. They're trying to eliminate me and ensure Centaur fails, leaving our forces vulnerable to the next generation of Typhoon vehicles, ones without the weaknesses I built in. Wilson? I'm not certain, but the sabotage attempts against Centaur match patterns I've seen before. Professional, sophisticated, designed to create catastrophic failure at the worst possible moment. Like during today's demonstration before the secretary. Exactly. Harrington considered the flash drive in his palm. If Keller was telling the truth, the information could be decisive. If he was lying, this could be an elaborate plot to compromise Centaur further. Why come to me with this? Why now? Because despite everything, despite our history, I know you care about the men and women who will operate these vehicles in combat. Just as I do. Keller's voice grew softer. And because I need to set the record straight about 73 Easting before it's too late. What about 73 Easting? The intelligence we received that night was deliberately falsified. The Iraqi forces we engaged were actually attempting to surrender. Their communications were being jammed by our own electronic warfare units. I discovered this when I diverted my platoon from the primary attack vector. Harrington felt cold despite the morning sun. That's not possible. They fired on my position first. I returned fire in self-defense. They fired warning shots trying to establish communication. But the intelligence briefing had convinced you they were preparing an ambush. Keller's eyes held no accusation, only a deep sadness. Neither of us knew the truth then. We were pawns in a larger game. Who? Why? Elements within our own command who needed a decisive victory to justify continued operations. The same elements who later recruited me for Operation Diamondback. The same forces now working to ensure America fields vulnerable weapons against next-generation threats. The enormity of the accusation left Harrington momentarily speechless. It contradicted everything he believed about his military service, about the battle that had defined his career. I need time to verify this. There is no time. The demonstration is in less than 3 hours, and I believe they're planning to ensure it fails catastrophically. Not just a malfunction, but something that will discredit the entire program, possibly something that will cost lives. Harrington's tactical mind shifted into combat mode. Who specifically should I watch? Hayes? Reynolds? Trust Sergeant Rodriguez. The rest? Keller shrugged. Verify the information on the drive. It will guide you. A distant sound caught Harrington's attention. Helicopter rotors approaching from the north. That's not scheduled, he noted, instantly alert. Keller tensed. We've been compromised. Go now. Take the drive. I'll create a diversion. James, if what you're saying is true, then I've been a patriot all along, just serving in the shadows. Keller managed a tight smile. Now move, Colonel. That's an order. Despite everything, the instinctive response to a command voice made Harrington turn toward the shore. He'd taken 3 strides when the first shots rang out. Precise, suppressed rifle fire from the tree line. He dove behind a wooden piling as bullets splintered the weathered boards around him. Looking back, he saw Keller stagger, blood blossoming on his shirt. The older man remained standing, drawing a concealed pistol and returning fire toward the trees. Go! Keller shouted before another bullet struck him squarely in the chest, throwing him backwards into the bay waters. Training and instinct took over. Harrington drew his sidearm and fired toward the muzzle flashes in the trees, creating cover as he moved in a combat crouch toward shore. More shots kicked up splinters around him, but the attacker's position offered poor firing angles along the narrow pier. Reaching the sandy shoreline, Harrington sprinted in a zigzag pattern toward the tree line west of the shooter's position. A bullet whispered past his ear, close enough that he felt its passage. Another tore through his jacket sleeve without striking flesh. The helicopter grew louder, now visible over the bay. Not military, civilian model, unmarked. Reinforcements for the assassins. Harrington reached the trees, using their cover to circle around behind the sniper's position. His combat experience took over, movement becoming instinctive. 15 seconds later, he identified the shooter. A professional, judging by the setup and equipment. Military trained. The man never heard Harrington's approach. A swift strike to the base of the skull rendered him unconscious. Harrington secured the sniper's weapon, a suppressed military-grade rifle with a thermal scope. Government issue, not something available to civilians. The helicopter was descending toward the pier, presumably to confirm Keller's death and retrieve the assassin. Harrington had minutes at most before they discovered their sniper was down. He ran to his hidden Humvee, started the engine, and accelerated away from the scene, taking a maintenance road that would conceal his departure. In the rearview mirror, he saw the helicopter touch down near the pier. Men in tactical gear deployed, moving with military precision. A professional hit team, using military equipment, targeting a man who claimed to be an American intelligence asset. The implications were staggering. Back at the Centaur facility, Harrington found Sergeant Rodriguez waiting outside his office, expression concerned. "Colonel, we've been looking for you. General Wilson's helicopter will land in 30 minutes. Dr. Hayes is organizing the welcoming committee. Sergeant, I need your help, privately." Rodriguez followed him into his office without question. Harrington secured the door, then handed him the flash drive. "I need you to verify the contents of this through secure Pentagon channels. Authorization code Foxtrot 7 Delta Echo. Report only to me." "Yes, sir. May I ask what this concerns?" "Potentially the identity of whoever has been sabotaging our project, and much more." Harrington checked his watch. "How are the preparations for the live fire demonstration?" "On schedule, sir. Lieutenant Weiss completed the system checks. All green across the board. Maintain normal procedures, but be alert. If you notice anything unusual, especially regarding Dr. Hayes or General Wilson, inform me immediately." Rodriguez nodded, his expression revealing nothing about what he might be thinking regarding these unusual orders. 20 minutes later, Harrington stood on the helicopter pad as Wilson's aircraft touched down. The downdraft whipped his uniform as the general emerged, followed by the Secretary of Defense and 2 aides. Harrington saluted crisply. "Welcome to Aberdeen, Mr. Secretary General." The secretary, a career politician with limited military background, shook his hand enthusiastically. "Colonel Harrington, looking forward to seeing this new vehicle of yours in action. The reports have been most encouraging." Wilson's handshake was firmer, his eyes evaluating Harrington carefully. "Colonel, you seem tense this morning." "Final preparations for a major weapons test, sir. Always some last-minute adjustments." "Of course. Where's Dr. Keller? I was told he'd be part of today's briefing." The question confirmed Harrington's suspicions. Wilson shouldn't have expected Keller's presence. The consultant's schedule had him working in the electronic warfare lab this morning, not participating in the demonstration. Dr. Keller was reassigned to laboratory work today. Critical electronic countermeasure refinements. Wilson frowned slightly. "I see. A pity. His insights would have been valuable." Hayes approached, greeting the visitors with professional courtesy. "Gentlemen, if you'll follow me, we've prepared a technical briefing before the live fire demonstration." As the group moved toward the main building, Harrington's phone vibrated. A text from Rodriguez. "Drive verified. Contents authentic. Wilson compromised." The confirmation landed like a physical blow. General Wilson, Harrington's superior and longtime colleague, was the traitor. The man who had appointed him to lead Centaur was simultaneously working to ensure its failure. But why bring the secretary to witness the demonstration? Unless Harrington's blood ran cold as the realization struck. Whatever sabotage was planned for today would be catastrophic enough to discredit the entire program, possibly serious enough to injure or kill observers, including the Secretary of Defense. He needed to stop the demonstration immediately, but a direct accusation against Wilson without concrete evidence would be dismissed as paranoia. He needed proof, and he needed to secure the Centaur prototype before whatever sabotage was planned could be activated. The briefing had already begun in the main conference room when Harrington slipped away, heading directly to the test range. Lieutenant Weiss was supervising final preparations, the Centaur positioned at the firing line facing a series of targets at varying distances. "Lieutenant, we need to postpone the demonstration." Weiss looked startled. Sir, everything's ready. Systems check out perfectly. That's an order, Lieutenant. The vehicle may have been compromised. Before she could respond, Reynolds approached from the control bunker. Colonel General Wilson is asking for you. The Secretary wants to proceed with the demonstration immediately. Tell them there's been a technical issue. We need at least an hour to resolve it. Reynolds appeared confused. But all systems are green. You authorized the final checklist yourself this morning. The situation has changed. Lieutenant Weiss, begin a complete diagnostic of the fire control and ammunition handling systems. Sergeant Rodriguez will assist when he arrives. As if summoned by his name, Rodriguez appeared, moving quickly toward them. Colonel, we have a problem. I reviewed the security footage from last night. Someone accessed the ammunition storage at 0200 hours. Who? The camera angle doesn't show a clear view of their face, but they used General Wilson's security credentials. What did they do? Replaced at least one of the test rounds. I can't tell what with, but it wasn't standard ammunition. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. They're going to sabotage the test firing, create an explosion or catastrophic barrel failure. Weiss paled. With the Secretary present, that would be a convenient accident that eliminates a political opponent and discredits the Centaur program in one stroke. Harrington's voice was grim. Rodriguez, secure the ammunition. Weiss, power down all Centaur systems. Reynolds, delay the Secretary and Wilson. Tell them we've detected a potential fuel leak. Before they could implement these orders, Hayes appeared at the entrance to the test range, the Secretary and Wilson beside her. There you are, Colonel, Wilson called, his voice pleasant but eyes hard. The Secretary is eager to see Centaur in action. Why don't we proceed with the demonstration immediately? Harrington's mind raced through options. Direct confrontation was risky without irrefutable proof, but allowing the demonstration to proceed could be catastrophic. General, we've detected a potential issue with the ammunition. Standard safety protocols require we inspect each round before firing. Wilson smiled thinly. Surely that's excessive caution, Colonel. The rounds were certified before delivery, and we don't want to waste the Secretary's valuable time. The Secretary looked between them, sensing tension, but not understanding its source. Perhaps we should follow safety protocols, General. I'm in no particular rush. Of course, Mr. Secretary, but I've personally reviewed the safety checks. Everything is in order. Wilson turned to Hayes. Dr. Hayes, please initiate the firing sequence. Hayes hesitated, looking to Harrington for confirmation. The moment stretched, the balance of authority suddenly unclear. Harrington made his decision. Lieutenant Weiss, escort the Secretary to the observation bunker. Maximum safety distance. Sergeant Rodriguez, secure that ammunition. Wilson's pleasant demeanor vanished. You're exceeding your authority, Colonel. Dr. Hayes, proceed with the demonstration as ordered. Belay that. Harrington's command voice filled the range. General Wilson, I have reason to believe the ammunition has been tampered with, possibly by someone using your security credentials. Wilson's hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. That's an outrageous accusation, one that could end your career. Better my career than American lives. Harrington turned to the Secretary. Sir, I request you move to safety immediately. I believe General Wilson may have compromised the Centaur project as part of a long-term operation to weaken American military capabilities. The Secretary's eyes widened. Colonel, that's an extraordinary claim. One I can support with evidence, sir, including the attempted assassination of a deep-cover American intelligence asset this morning. Wilson's expression hardened. Keller is dead? The question, revealing knowledge he shouldn't have possessed, condemned him more effectively than any evidence could have. Harrington's gaze locked with Wilson's. How did you know Keller was targeted, General? No report has been filed. No communication sent. A moment of silence fell across the test range. Then several things happened simultaneously. Wilson drew his sidearm with practiced speed. Hayes lunged forward, attempting to tackle the Secretary out of the line of fire. And Rodriguez, positioned behind Wilson, delivered a precise strike to the General's arm, sending the weapon clattering to the ground. Within seconds, Wilson was restrained, his face a mask of cold fury. You have no idea what you're interfering with, Harrington. No idea at all. I know enough. You betrayed your oath, your country, the men and women who serve under you. I served the greater strategy, just as Keller did, before his conscience made him unreliable. Wilson's laugh held no humor. Did he feed you some noble story about being a double agent all along, working for American interests from deep cover? Pathetic. Actually, General, his story checks out. Rodriguez produced a tablet displaying official verification codes. Keller was indeed operating under Pentagon authorization, deep cover operation codenamed Diamondback. The secretary stepped forward, his political demeanor replaced by cold authority. General Wilson, you are relieved of command, effective immediately. You will be detained pending full investigation into these allegations. Military police appeared, summoned by Weiss during the confrontation. They took Wilson into custody with professional efficiency. As Wilson was led away, he turned back to Harrington. This isn't over, Colonel. The forces at work here are beyond your comprehension. Centaur is obsolete before it's even built. The future belongs to autonomous systems, not human operators in armored boxes. That's where you're wrong, General. Harrington nodded toward the Centaur prototype. The future belongs to the integration of human judgment and technological capability. Something you never understood. After Wilson's departure, the test range fell quiet. The secretary approached Harrington, expression grave. I think I'm owed a complete explanation, Colonel. Yes, sir, but first, we need to secure this facility and verify that no further sabotage has occurred. And he hesitated. We need to determine if James Keller survived. The secretary nodded. Proceed, Colonel. Full authority. Whatever you need. The following hours passed in a blur of security sweeps, systems checks, and debriefings. By late afternoon, the facility had been declared secure. The sabotaged ammunition had been identified and neutralized, a specially modified round designed to explode within the barrel upon firing. More disturbing were the documents found in Wilson's personal effects, revealing a years-long operation to influence American weapons development toward increasingly automated, AI-driven systems, all containing subtle vulnerabilities known to potential adversaries. As evening approached, Harrington sat in his office with the secretary, Reynolds, Weiss, and Rodriguez, reviewing what they had uncovered. Wilson appears to have been operating as an agent of influence for at least a decade, Harrington explained, pushing American weapons development in directions that appeared advanced but contained fundamental weaknesses. The secretary shook his head. The damage assessment will take months, years possibly. There's more, sir. Harrington hesitated, then continued. Keller provided information suggesting that the Battle of 73 Easting, the engagement that defined both our careers, may have been manipulated, that the Iraqi forces we engaged were attempting to surrender, not attack. A heavy silence fell over the room. Can this be verified? The secretary finally asked. I've initiated a review of all communications and intelligence from that period. If Keller was telling the truth, we'll find evidence. Weiss cleared her throat. Speaking of Keller, sir, Coast Guard recovered a body matching his description an hour ago. Positive identification is pending, but preliminary reports indicate fatal gunshot wounds. The news struck Harrington harder than expected. Despite their complicated history, despite decades of believing Keller a traitor, the possibility that he had been serving America all along changed everything. He gave his life to warn us, Harrington said quietly. Whatever his past actions, he died trying to protect American forces. The secretary stood. Colonel, I want you to continue leading the Centaur project. With Wilson's influence removed, we need to reevaluate the design priorities and ensure no hidden vulnerabilities remain. Yes, sir, but there is one more thing we need to discuss. Harrington turned to Reynolds. Dr. Reynolds, you advocated strongly for a 3-person crew configuration, an approach that Wilson supported. I need to know if your position was influenced by him. Reynolds paled slightly. He suggested that automation was the future, that reducing crew size demonstrated progressive thinking. But the design was mine. And fundamentally flawed, Harrington stated flatly, as you now recognize. Yes, Reynolds nodded. Your 4-person configuration is superior. I see that now, especially given what we've learned about potential electronic warfare vulnerabilities. The secretary checked at his watch. I need to return to Washington. The Joint Chiefs will need to be briefed immediately. Colonel, I expect daily updates on Centaur's progress. After the secretary's departure, Harrington found himself alone on the test range, standing before the Centaur prototype in the fading light. The day's events had altered the project's trajectory completely. With Wilson's influence removed, they could proceed with a design truly focused on crew survival and combat effectiveness. His phone vibrated with an incoming text. Thomas. Just got orders. Deployment in 60 days. Classified location. Call when you can. The message underscored the urgency of their work. His son and thousands of American soldiers like him would soon be facing threats in an increasingly dangerous world. threats potentially shaped by the same forces that had corrupted Wilson. Sir? Harrington turned to find Rodriguez approaching, a folder in his hand. Coast Guard confirmed it was Keller's body. No survivors. Thank you, Sergeant. There's more, sir. We completed the analysis of the Typhoon schematics Keller provided. The weaknesses he built into the system are sophisticated but exploitable. If Centaur incorporates these countermeasures, it will have a significant tactical advantage. Make it happen. Priority implementation. Yes, sir, Rodriguez hesitated. Permission to speak freely? Always. My father used to talk about you, said you were the kind of officer who put the welfare of his men above politics or career advancement. That's rare, sir, especially at your rank. Your father was a good man, Sergeant. I'm glad his son carries on that tradition. Rodriguez nodded, then offered a crisp salute before departing. Harrington returned his attention to the Centaur, its angular form silhouetted against the setting sun. The vehicle represented more than just a weapons platform. It embodied a philosophy of warfare that balanced technology with human judgment, speed with survivability, firepower with crew protection. A philosophy Wilson and his hidden allies had tried to subvert in favor of automated systems vulnerable to manipulation. A week later, Harrington stood in the same spot as the Centaur, now fully operational, powered up for its first complete systems test. This time, there was no sabotage, no hidden agenda. Just the culmination of dedicated work by engineers and soldiers committed to creating the best possible protection for American forces. In the commander's hatch stood Thomas, specially assigned to the Centaur testing program, after Harrington had requested an experienced tank commander to evaluate real-world tactical applications. Ready when you are, sir, Thomas called down. Harrington nodded to the test team. Proceed with live fire demonstration. The Centaur's 115 mm main gun elevated slightly, tracking a target 3 kilometers distant. Inside, Thomas and his crew worked with practiced coordination, bringing advanced technology and human judgment together in lethal harmony. The gun fired, its report echoing across the range. Downrange, the target erupted in a satisfying explosion, a direct hit at maximum effective range. Target destroyed, the range officer confirmed. Perfect shot placement. Harrington allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. The path to this moment had been fraught with betrayal, sacrifice, and hard truths about the past. But the result would save American lives in conflicts to come. As testing continued throughout the day, each successful engagement confirmed what Harrington had always believed, that technology, no matter how advanced, was only as effective as the human beings employing it. That experience and judgment remained irreplaceable, even in an age of artificial intelligence and automation. 3 months later, Harrington stood at attention on the same parade ground where his retirement ceremony had been planned, now watching as the first production Centaur rolled past in a formal presentation ceremony. Secretary of Defense Lawrence Chambers presided, his remarks emphasizing the vehicle's innovative design and superior capabilities. The Centaur represents the best of American military engineering, the secretary concluded. But more importantly, it represents the unbreakable bond between technology and the brave men and women who employ it in defense of freedom. Following the ceremony, Thomas approached in his dress uniform, captain's bars gleaming on his shoulders. Deployment orders came through, he said quietly. My company will be the first to field Centaur in combat operations. Harrington nodded, pride mingling with the eternal father's concern for a son heading into danger. The vehicle will serve you well, but remember what makes it effective isn't the technology, it's the judgment of the commander. I learned from the best, Thomas smiled. Will you be returning to retirement now that the project is complete? Not exactly. Harrington gazed across the parade ground, where more Centaurs waited for their crews. The secretary has asked me to head a comprehensive review of weapons development programs, identifying and eliminating any remaining vulnerabilities Wilson might have introduced. Sounds important? It is, but not as important as what you'll be doing, leading men into combat, making the decisions that bring them home alive. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, father and son, the elder's career transitioning as the younger's ascended. Both dedicated to the same principles of duty, honor, and the protection of those who served alongside them. There's something else, Harrington said finally. The investigation into 73 Easting has been reopened. Preliminary findings suggest Keller was telling the truth. The Iraqi forces were attempting to surrender that night. Thomas studied his father's face. Does that change anything for you? Harrington considered the question carefully. It changes how I view that particular engagement. but not how I view my responsibility to the men and women under my command, then or now. That's what matters in the end, isn't it? Not the politics or the technology, the people. Always. As the sun set over Fort Hood, casting long shadows across the parade ground, Harrington reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. What had begun as a final assignment before retirement had transformed into something far more significant, a reckoning with the past, a battle against internal betrayal, and ultimately a recommitment to the principles that had guided his entire career. The Centaur would soon face its ultimate test in combat operations, but Harrington was confident in its capabilities, and more importantly, in the men and women who would command it. They carried forward a tradition of courage, adaptability, and unwavering commitment that no technology could replace and no enemy could defeat. In the gathering darkness, the prototype Centaur stood silhouetted against the horizon, its distinctive profile a testament to American engineering and the indomitable human spirit that gave it purpose. Not merely a machine of war, but an extension of the warriors who operated it, a fusion of steel and flesh, technology and judgment, power and responsibility. Steel thunder for a dangerous world. And behind that thunder, the steady hearts and clear minds of soldiers like Thomas Harrington, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Colonel Michael Harrington saluted the vehicle and the men it would carry into battle. His final mission complete, but his legacy just beginning. The end.